Morning to all the viewers, both here in St. Lucia and in the diaspora. I want to deal with two specific issues this morning. First of all is the St. Jude's Hospital, and the second one would be the GPH deal, or steal, as some people have referred to it as. In the case of St. Jude's, I think that all St. Lucians would have already understood the difference between the old St. Jude's and the new St. Jude's building that my government had initiated. The old building is 80 years old, and when it was first built, it was not designed to be a hospital. It was during World War II that the US military made it into a hospital. And as you remember, in 2009, September 9th to be exact, there was a catastrophic fire that destroyed that building. And it was the decision then of the Stephenson King administration, of which I was a cabinet member. The decision was made to rebuild the old building. Initially, simply to replace what was there, but nonetheless to rebuild the old building. And under that time, 2 years, about $30 million was spent on trying to fix the building, repair it. It was not completed. The new administration, Kenny Anthony administration, came in, and after taking some time to review the situation, made the decision that they were going to expand on what Stephenson King was attempting to do and actually make it a full-fledged hospital in the same building. And we saw that 5 years went by and over $100 million was spent on trying to fulfill that mission. When my administration came in and we had a study done, we recognized that even if we were to complete the building, it would be subpar and inadequate. But it was difficult to assess how much it was actually going to cost to finish the building. The estimates that were provided by Kenny Anthony's team in a letter in April of 2016 said that at minimum it was going to take another $100 million and approximately another year to complete. The study that we did said yes, it would be $100 million, but based on the assumption that the electricals, the plumbing, and the sewage system, and some of the structures of the building were okay. The report went on to say that it was suspect as to whether that would be the case, and therefore it would take longer and cost substantially more than the $100 million. It was on the basis of that report that my administration, looking at our overall development plans for the South. So remember, we were talking about building a new airport terminal to increase the size of the airport by threefold. We were talking about putting a cruise ship facility with home porting. We had the DSH project that had already started with the horse racing track and now was to go into a second phase of a university, a hotel, and a casino, and then to be followed by more hotels and a residential area in both St. Jude, as well as the building of a new island off of Ile Pirata, which is where the cruise ship berth would have been. We saw the expansion of the call centers. We saw the expansion during our tenure of Coconut Bay, and we were looking at developments in Black Bay, as well as canals. So with that kind of development taking place, clearly having a hospital that would only meet the immediate needs of the South was not a good plan. And so the decision was to make a substantially bigger hospital. And I want to say that the physical size of the new building that we were building was 20% bigger than OKEU. bigger than OKEU, 20%. And the goal was to make upstairs an international hospital, hence you had the helicopter pad, and the bottom part of the building would have been our local hospital. All in all, we would have had over 150 beds available at that facility. And to convert the old building, because we'd spent so much money on it already, into a university, and specifically into a nursing school, because we know that as many nurses as we can train, those persons are going to get jobs both locally and also internationally. We have an aging population in the world. The demand for nurses is high, and we knew that any amount of money invested in helping to train our young women and men to become nurses, that this was a viable career path for many St. Lucians. The new government came in and decided that it was going to take some chemical and some paint to fix up the building. And after they did their own analysis, they believed that they would have been able to finish the old building faster and cheaper than it was going to be to complete the new building. That's what their report said. And on the basis of that, they abandoned continuing the new hospital and decided to focus their efforts on the old building. So here's what we know. We know Stevenson King, Kenny Anthony, and Philip Pierre all had the ambition to convert an 80-year-old building that had a catastrophic fire and to somehow salvage that building and to present it to the people of St. Lucia, and particularly to the people in the south of the island, as being the solution. So collectively, Stevenson King, $30 million, Kenny Anthony, about $110 million, and now we're hearing from the Philip Pierre administration that they're going to spend $270 million on this building. So collectively, $400 million to build a hospital that would be outdated and antiquated the moment it opens. And up to now, we cannot get confirmation as to how many beds this is going to contain. No details. All we keep hearing is a story, it's soon come, soon come. We're there, we're almost there. That's 4 years has gone by. So we see 11 years between the three of them and $400 million. Versus we went in to build a brand new building that would have been state-of-the-art, that would have lasted the South and facilitated the growth that we had ambitions for in the South. We spent $130 million. And that was in our 5-year term. And remember, our 5-year term was interrupted by COVID for 2 years. This is damning when you look at the evidence, and we can look back in hindsight. And the question is, who is going to be responsible for paying that bill? It's the people of St. Lucia. So the people of St. Lucia are going to pay $400 million just for the old building. And if you want to include our new building, over $500 million EC dollars. Now, I want to put $400 million into proper perspective. $400 million is what the estimate was to build the brand new airport terminal. So the airport terminal, the jetways, the road going up to the second floor, the new tarmac, and also all the new traffic control tower, everything was going to cost $400 million. So it's very easy for people to see whether, in fact, we've gotten value for our dollar. We can see that we have 3 former prime ministers that clearly had no ambition, have no vision to where St. Lucia was going to go. They're actually building something for yesterday, not something for tomorrow. I think that this is a project that we all need to keep a very close eye on. And we have to hold this government accountable, because they had the opportunity to have put their protect the victory and silly politics aside and to have done what was right for the people in the South and done what was right for the people of this country. And they failed to do it because they are so blinded by politics and envy. And sadly, we are all being asked to pay and foot that bill, not only in terms of having to finance it, but the time that has been lost. The people who have stayed in the stadium, the St. Lucians who have had inadequate services because of the conditions of the stadiums and the limitations of the stadium. And they've destroyed hope in the South. The second thing I want to talk about this morning is the GPH. And I think that the situation that occurred in the House, where I was able to bring to the attention to the St. Lucian public the hypocrisy and the lies of the Labour Party. You'll remember very clearly that my administration, and me in particular, that I was demonized over the DSH project. And there were two things specifically that were brought up about the DSH project. One was that we leased the land, $1 an acre, for 99 years. And that was 180 acres. They started off trying to say it was 1,000 acres, but we were able to now clarify that it wasn't. And that the land that was being leased was to develop the horse racing track. And so in leasing the land to DSH, it was to give them permission now to develop the property. They brought the money to the table to build the horse racing track. I'm in court with Richard Frederick because he indicated that I gave DSH access to the CIP or passports to be able to fund that. That is a categorical lie. DSH was never approved for a CIP project for the horse racing track. DSH had received CIP approval for the hotel development, but never even started that process, even though they were approved. But it had never included the horse racing track. So in fact, the $30 million that was spent by DSH to build the horse racing track was their own money. So where is the hypocrisy and the inconsistency? We now found out, halls of justice, that the government of St. Lucia leased the land to NH for $1. We also now know to be fact that there are several parcels of land on our port that was leased to GPH for $1. Now, this dollar is a nominal amount that is normally included in any legal transaction. So exactly what Ernest Hilaire said. We've rented them the land. But in exchange in renting the land, they've agreed to develop it. Well, let's look at that. So in the case of DSH, we rented them land. In exchange, they were going to build a horse racing track. They were going to operate the horse racing track. They were going to fund all the operation expenses of the horse racing track. They were going to promote the horse racing track. But all of the money that DSH was using was their own money. Let's look at the GPH deal. You're going to rent them the land at the port. But the difference is is that the head tax, which is revenue that the government was obtaining, the government gave up the head tax. In exchange, gave GPH not the $6.50 that the government of St. Lucia was making, but increased it to $10. That's money that belonged to the state. GPH didn't do anything to generate that. They haven't built anything in St. Lucia. But since April, we have given them $10. 700,000 passengers came in, $7 million in the first year they've made. They then turned around, and we have it here, that 8th of April 2024, that they gave GPH incentives, as we would have given DSH incentives. In this particular case, they gave them 100% exemption from the payment of income tax for 30 years. And I want to say that these incentives are also contingent on the concession agreement that SLASPA and the government of St. Lucia signed with GPH. What does that mean? That means if the concession agreement grants them an extension to 40 years, that these incentives automatically will be extended for another 10 years. So 100% waiver of income tax. Exemption from payment of withholding tax for a period of 30 years. On the repatriation of profits, dividends, mortgage payments, capital investment payments, anything that generates revenue for GPH will be exempt. That they be exempted from paying any property tax. That the grant be exempt for blocks and parcels 181, 182, etc., and any third-party lender financing. So I want to explain that, because sometimes we peruse over these things. We don't understand what is it that the government has done. So I've already told you. In the case of DSH, released them the land, but DSH brought their own money to the table. In this case, with GPH, they've leased them the land, they've given them the money, the $10. It can be anywhere between $7 million a year to $10 million a year. And the purpose of leasing them the land was that GPH could use the land in St. Lucia that they didn't own, that they're only having to pay $1 a year for, so that GPH can give it to the bank as collateral. Remember, GPH has agreed to pay off the loan of SLASPA. So the Bank of St. Lucia, from what I understand, has given GPH the loan, and if it's not the Bank of St. Lucia, it's First National, it's one of our local banks, has given GPH the loan and taking our land as collateral. Our land. They have not had to put any other collateral of their own. And understand what the implications of that are. If this deal goes bad, whichever bank has given the loan, the bank is now entitled to have control of the land. They've brought nothing to the table. Nothing. They are exempted from excise tax, 100% grant of waiver of excise tax on the procurement of 2 vehicles, 100% waiver of customs duty on the procurement of 2 vehicles, and that we've also agreed to lease them the lands. So I only put up 1 lease. There are 4 leases. The Vendors Arcade, the shopping mall, La Place Carnage, where the old customs building was, and where the fast ferries are. All that land is being leased for $1 a year, the separate parcels. And the money to develop the properties, because they said they're going to now spend $45 million, and I want to get into that, US, of which $20 million is going to be for the loan. Understand that. The capital that they're talking about is to take over the loan that SLASPA was already paying for. So $25 million US dollars is what they're going to spend. Quick calculation. If they're going to get $10 million US dollars a year for 30 years, that's $300 million US dollars. If you get it for 40 years, $400 million US dollars, assuming that we only are at a million passengers. And we all think that the cruise industry is going to grow organically. So to spend $25 million and to take over the loan, $45 million US, we're giving them $400 million US dollars. So it means that over a 40-year period of time, GPH will get $10 million US dollars a year, and we will get $1 million US dollars a year. And that $1 million US dollars, they get to control. They get to decide how it's going to be spent. Now, there's another document, very, very, very important document, which is both a cabinet paper and a report from a committee that was put together to review the GPH deal. So this was a report to cabinet that was presented, let me show you. And signed by Stevenson King. That's the report that he put out, that he sent to cabinet. And the report says, the committee recommended by the way of an interim report the rejection of the GPH proposal which was presented to cabinet for approval on the basis that it does not represent the best economic and financial option for the country over the next 30 years. That the proposal be rejected. Moreover, SLASPA has, subsequent to the receipt of the GPH proposal, developed a master plan for Castries Port, which it intends to use to guide the development of the Castries Seaport. Negotiations with prospective investors will therefore be based upon the master plan. Since the submission of the initial proposal, the representatives of GPH met with the Minister of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries on March 29th and submitted a revised proposal on April 1st. Appropriately, April 1st. It says, GPH should indicate upfront the revenue sharing proposal as part of its revised proposal. So if the government of St. Lucia was already receiving $650, and it's the government of St. Lucia that went to the cruise lines and told them they're going to increase the tax now to $12, should there not be fair sharing? Shouldn't it be that the government of St. Lucia at minimum gets $5? Or the $650 that they had already? And tell GPH, whatever amount you increase it to past the $650 is yours up until maybe $12. And anytime the head tax goes higher than $12, then there'll be a sharing of that amount. Why should the government of St. Lucia have given up the revenue that they already had? And especially knowing that GPH played no role, zero role, in getting the head tax to go up. I can say to you, as the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, that the cruise lines had already agreed to increase the tax. So there was no negotiations by this government or GPH to get the tax increased. This dual approach toward agreeing on the capital investment before negotiating the revenue sharing agreement is not preferred approach, as both the capital investment and the revenue sharing elements of the concession agreement are interlocked. You can't look at sharing what they're going to spend without knowing how the revenue is going to be shared. Simple English, basic common sense. They said SLASPA is required to maintain the cruise infrastructure over the last concession. So even though GPH is going to be funding the capital investment and improvements of the port, the maintenance of the ports over the 30 or 40-year period has to be undertaken by SLASPA. And it goes on to say, this includes dredging and other maintenance works that it will be required to undertake. It is strongly recommended that the revenue sharing agreement provides SLASPA with sufficient revenue to cover these expenses. Now, if it's gone to $12 or $12.50, because we still don't know, and we know that GPH is getting 10, and we know that solid waste gets $1.50, it leaves $1 for SLASPA to be able to cover these expenses. That's the steal. GPH has told the government of St. Lucia the strength of Global Ports Holding brand is the ability to leverage all its operations worldwide to ensure that each destination receives what is reasonable and fair without retribution from the cruise lines as seen in the past. Well, we have not had to wait long. Dominic Fede has given you the arrival numbers. And our cruise ship arrivals are plummeting. It does not take long to figure out why. So Tommy Descartes has revealed to you that the deal in Antigua, when the Antigua government attempted to increase the tax for everyone, Carnival Cruise Lines and Royal Caribbean said, hell no. Hell no. And the deal was amended, and Carnival and Royal Caribbean were exempted from the deal. What does that mean? It means any increase in the head tax do not apply to them. So they're still paying the same fee. Meanwhile, Dominica has not increased its fees. St. Vincent has not increased its fees. And Grenada have not increased their fees. St. Kitts has not increased its fees. And as a result of it, the cruise lines are going where it's cheaper. So now that our price is $12, the cruise lines are going somewhere else. So tell me how signing the agreement with GPH is going to protect us, because GPH does not represent Dominica, does not represent St. Vincent, does not represent Grenada, and now we know in Antigua they only represent all of the other cruise lines, which makes up 20%, but it does not represent Carnival and Royal Caribbean. We've seen since the deal in Antigua, the only company to have increased the numbers into Antigua has been Carnival. Brings up an interesting point. When certain persons would try to convince St. Lucians that the idea of building a cruise ship port in Vieux Fort was not a good idea, then why is it, since we abandoned that project, that now Antigua has been made a home port? And the same Carnival that we had been negotiating with has split their business between Barbados and Antigua. So St. Lucia was sold out by this government and by GPH and by those same persons that would come and try to tell you that it could never work. The fact is, we would have had one of the best home ports in the world because of the proximity as to where the cruise ship was coming in and where the airport was. And the decision that when we were building the new airport terminal, instead of demolishing the old building, we would convert the old building into a cruise ship terminal, so when the passengers arrived off the plane, they would be processed privately at that old airport. Finally, GPH, as part of the signed concession agreement, will work with the St. Lucia Air Seaports Authority to revise the master plan and provide expertise to look at possible scenarios for cargo relocation and the improvement of cruise experiences. Immediate implementation of a new head tax of $10. Now, the cargo brings up an interesting point. So it says here, the GPH shall, throughout the contract period, have the right to match any proposals or offers to develop and build any cruise port developments in Vieux Fort and St. Lucia. I have no idea how it's worded in the concession agreement, but that's certainly what it's worded in the review document. And it begs the question, what was the final decision on Vieux Fort? So we're making all these sacrifices, and Vieux Fort is paying the price. What's interesting here, that they have a map of the master plan shown below. And they have all these letters pointing out the different locations. And C and G is where Renault has bought the land by Bonanza. And it says, relocation of roll-on, roll-off berth from southern end of berth 5 to Bonanza Bay. And C, construction of a new berth to accommodate lumber and break bulk vessels. It has become so difficult to keep up with the lies of this government. So why was the land sold to Renault? And Renault is currently doing the exact same thing that was proposed by SLASPA. Instead now, it is being done privately for one company rather than being there for everybody. And to relieve the pressure that's taking place at the port. But clearly SLASPA is not in a position to do it because the money that SLASPA was earning and potentially how much more money SLASPA could have earned, they're not in a position to develop it. So what did they have to do? Sell it. And when the land came available for them to buy it, and we've seen in the documents, in the minutes of the meeting and a letter that was written by SLASPA to tell the National Housing Corporation, we are interested in purchasing the land. And notwithstanding that, National Housing sold the land to Renault for 2.7 million EC dollars. Think about that for a moment. Over 100,000 square feet. Land in town is $1,000 a square feet. This is waterfront property. You want to tell me the waterfront property is worth $27 a square foot? And meanwhile, you're selling lands in Babonneau and other parts of the island for $25 and $30 a square foot? This is what we have as a government. And the numbers on the St. Jude's Hospital, the numbers on this GPH deal don't add up. We have a member of parliament in Ernest Hillier. And let's accept it, that there has been a pattern of behavior with this man for the longest time. We could never forget when Timothy Polio asked him whether in fact Jufali had a diplomatic passport. And remember, we never knew about Jufali when he was the High Commissioner. We were never told. It's only when the story broke because of a court case. And he was on that phone call spinning When we found out that there was an account opened up with Jafali, he denied. He said he's never had a joint account with anybody. Yet the evidence is there by the Auditor General, not by me, by the Auditor General, confirming that there was an account that was opened up and that Jafali put the money in. And the signatures to the account was Jafali and the High Commissioner, who was Ernest Hilaire. Never got permission to open up the account. Never told the government of St. Lucia, the Minister of Finance, that money was arrived. Did not ask for permission as to how. And he spun that. And then when he fraudulently obtained a car, a Range Rover, and tried to bring that car into St. Lucia and got caught, he spun that as well. And I dare say, benefited from support of technocrats and different offices in St. Lucia to facilitate that, going as far as getting a case withdrawn. What was the court case? The court case was no big case. The court case was simply to provide the evidence to show that you own the car. And the issue was he was the High Commissioner. And he used his position to put the car in the name of the state. That's what he did wrong. He abused his office. And he put it in the name of the state so the car would be purchased duty-free in the UK. And people say, well, the UK government should take it up. How is the UK government going to take it up? They have a letter from the High Commissioner saying the car belonged to the High Commission. The question is, who gave him permission to do that? You then had Philip Martinez say that there were 12,000 files sold. Ernest Hilaire gave us all kinds of spin. That's not true. He has to ask for permission to give us the information. All of those things. Spin, spin, spin. Only to find out that when we get the contracts, that Philip Martinez was 100% right. 12,000 files. You then come out and say that you have suspended the program, the infrastructure program, and you've terminated contracts. But there's nothing in the public domain or any document that has come out from the government of St. Lucia to say that's the case. And I have to ask myself, if in fact the program has been suspended and terminated, and the contract terminated, why is Galaxy in Japan with the minister as we speak today? Why? What are they doing? What are they selling? More spin. When I confronted him in the House about the dollar lease, no, that's not true. I'm going to stop Parliament for you to be able to produce the document. Well, we produced the document. Here are the leases. Here's 2 of them. That you lease the land for $1. Come and tell us about that. Oh, it's rent. And there was conditions to the lease. Papi show, taking all of us for morons. Spin. And I'm very happy that the party has put out a press statement on this Eldridge situation, because it's worrying. It's worrying that a Speaker of the House would have come out and been so adamant in protecting the innocence of Ernest Hilaire, and that he, Ernest Hilaire, also came out and said, I never touched her. Yet, a video comes out and shows otherwise. And where's the spin now? AI. But as Spider said on his show last night, AI in this case stands for actual image. You can't even confront the truth. No matter how many times the proof has been presented in front of him, it has always been the same answer. And as guilty and as unexcusable as to what Hilaire has done, the Prime Minister of this country is even more accountable, because ultimately it is his word. He is the authority. Ministers serve at his pleasure. And to have a minister of government that repeatedly finds himself in these kinds of messes and continuously lies and spins to protect the truth, when he's given away hundreds of millions of dollars, the worst deals that this country has ever seen, has been under this minister. We see the cruise ship numbers declining. We see hotel arrival numbers declining. And these are monies that could have been used to help strengthen our hospitals. As a person said the other day, for people in St. Lucia who don't have the benefit of going to a private facility and have to depend on Betty Wells and OKEU and the healthcare centers. Going back to school. Imagine what $1 billion US can do. And we're talking about $3 billion US. The roads, the schools, the playing facilities. And I've not even gotten into all of the other projects, whether it's NLA, CIP, halls of justice, the 2.5% tax, that this government has betrayed the trust of the people of this country. That's what the fact is. It's not sufficient to say enough is enough anymore. When you cannot even trust anything that this government says. Richard Fedrick now coming and saying, well, he never said that the evidence was in the custody suites. Are you kidding? That's exactly what he said in the House. So he's lying about the lie he already said. And he's another one. Spin, spin, spin. It's always somebody else's fault. So I want to say to all of us, United Workers' Party was preparing for this day. I used an example in my speech on Sunday, and I talked about Noah building his ark. And nobody knew what he was doing and why he was doing it until it started to rain. And when it started to pour and the place started to get flooded, everybody then understood why Noah built his ark. Well, the United Workers' Party has understood that this day was coming. And we have built a team of men and women to take this country out of the despair that we're in and to return honesty and integrity to this country. To return hope and pride, nationalism, where we can stand and be proud of who we are as St. Lucians and be proud of the people who are representing us. And on Sunday, we're going to be launching those 17 candidates. So I'm inviting all of you, regardless of whether you have supported our party in the past. This is a new United Workers' Party. This is a party that's going to celebrate. And I know in speaking to Lady Compton, that the Comptons have never wanted to celebrate the death of Sir John, and they've only wanted to celebrate his birth. But tomorrow, Sunday, is an opportunity for us to have a fresh beginning. September 7th, in Micoud North. Come, join us. Show the Labour Party that we are ready for change. And we're not going to say it's enough is enough anymore. We've already passed that point. What we're going to say to the Labour Party on Sunday is ring the bell. Come and join us on this crusade to rescue St. Lucia. Thank you.